Welcome back. Real quickly, I just wanted to analyze the 4 Blitz games that I played yesterday on my first ever live Twitch stream. Kind of impressed with myself that I figured out how to make that happen. But this is the first game. In this one, it began with the England Gambit, which is a choice that Black makes when I guess they don't want to play against regular D4 openings like the London system or the Queen's Gambit declined. I had made a couple of blunders already by this point and got myself into trouble. I'm down, as you can see here, minus 6.2. That's a really significant disadvantage. But one thing that I've learned over the last several months is that at this level of chess, one thing that makes a huge difference is gaining the initiative. When your opponent feels like you're attacking them, they feel like they have to respond. Also I've learned that a lot of people at this level are trade happy. So I took advantage of that here by pushing this pawn forward, which it threatens the queen. Now I know this spot is heavily guarded here, and I know that they're going to win this trade because they have more pieces guarding this square than I do. However, I know that they're also going to be scared of this pin because they have not yet castled. I really don't have much of other advantages here, so I just went after, hey, push that. Maybe they'll put the queen in a bad spot. It is a blitz game after all. They don't have a lot of time to think about it. The engine, as you can see, it's just saying, hey, just why not put the queen here? And this pawn's never getting through. Or just put the queen here and they're fine. Or just put the queen here. Any of those spots are great. But they took, which was a blunder. I don't know exactly why it was a blunder other than the fact that there's still this pin here. I took because, again, I didn't know what else to do. They recaptured. And here it says I should just put my queen over there. And I really don't know why. I guess because then I would have 2 pieces hitting the knight. Regardless, what I did was this. I put the bishop right here on e4, and this is an empty 1-move threat. That's why it counts it as a blunder, because not only is my opponent up a piece and 2 pawns, you'll notice that they're up. Like, they're up a minor piece and 2 pawns. Right? I'm missing a pawn here. I'm missing both my central pawns. This is an empty 1-move threat. But not only can they easily move out of it, but they can just trade queens here. Remember, when you're up a piece, every equal trade is to your advantage. Every equal trade. But a few moves ago, this knight, if you'll remember, was over here. And it was a mate threat except for the fact that I had a knight. They were still focused on that. They went back there. Because now that my knight is not here anymore guarding that h2 pawn, this is a legitimate mate threat if I don't do something about it. The problem is they didn't notice that not only am I still hitting the rook, but once I move that bishop, it's check. Also, I can just take the knight. So my opponent blundered away what advantage they had here. I took the rook with check. When they moved out of check, I took the knight, and now I have a huge advantage. They weren't sure what to do. I put them in check, and they resign. So watch out for stuff like that, and keep in mind that at this level, taking the initiative and pushing the attack is often enough, especially in really fast time controls. Okay, this is a position we reached after 10 moves in game 2. Which also began with the England Gambit. I think that's the first time I've ever had 2 England Gambits in a row. My opponent has just blundered here, and I'm not sure exactly why this is a blunder. All I could figure out is it looks like they're targeting this pawn. They have 2 pieces aimed here, and I only have 1 piece defending it, my queen. So they're basically just going to win that pawn for free. The computer says I have a huge advantage. I didn't know that at the time. They've made this infiltration. They've taken out they're 2 pawns ahead right now. And I blunder almost immediately by doing that. I guess my thought was I was going to guard this pawn, but this just hangs a knight. And as soon as I moved it, I realized that, and they realized it too. So here it looks like they've hung a knight as well by moving that bishop out of the way. I'm sure I didn't see that, but well, I know I didn't see it because I never took that knight. But here I did see something. After they took my knight, I realized that this bishop over here is pointing at this square, and my queen is pointing at that square. And if I can get my queen there, that would be checkmate. And I thought, how can I have two pieces in the way. What if I moved this knight over here, threatening the bishop? Then the bishop will move, and I can do it. So I did that, which is a huge blunder, gives my opponent a huge advantage, because they can just put the bishop right there. Yes, they're going to run away from that knight, but they're just going to put it there, and then my bishop's no longer pointed at the important square, right? But again, it's a blitz game. I've taken the advantage. They don't have a lot of time. They have a lot of squares to consider where they can put that bishop, and they put it back where it was, which allowed checkmate. So again, here I don't know if the lesson is the same thing about taking the initiative or not. I know that here I should have just taken this knight. It was free. It was sitting right there. I just didn't see it. But I did see something, and I had a plan, and I carried it out. And by taking the initiative and threatening the bishop, they just decided, let's move the bishop back to a safe square, and they didn't see that at all. So that worked out well for me. Let's move on to game 3. This is game 3. Position reached about move 6 after I opened with the Scandinavian. They played e4, I played d5. I have just not only gained equality, but have a really slight advantage at this point. For several moves, the evaluation bar just hovered right there around the middle. Here, I saw that I could advance this pawn, which would threaten their knight, and it might also trick this into moving. I will get a queen trade. Their king will lose castling rights. So I just decided to go for it and break it open. I had just won those first 2 games. I was, feeling pretty confident, so I did that. It turns out that taking that pawn actually is the best move for black, according to the engine. I don't know if it's the best move for an average player at my level, but that's what they did. So I went with my plan. They lost castling rights. The follow-up here, though, is that I get to take this pawn and threaten that pawn. So that's what I did. Even if they immediately moved to protect the f2 pawn, doing so would not put my knight in danger, and I can continue developing. For example, I can bring this bishop out, then I can castle, I can get this bishop out, and I'm doing okay. But here, I guess they didn't see that I was aiming for that pawn. They didn't see the fork coming, so they made a empty one-move threat against this knight. It's also possible they were just planning on developing another piece, bringing the rook to take advantage of a pin. But that's too slow for that, because I get the pawn with check, and now I'm going to win the rook, or the bishop for that matter. They can't protect the rook, but they can protect the bishop, so that's what they did. So I took the rook, and they went after my knight instead of developing another piece. I don't know if that was their best move or not, but I know I can protect these squares so the king can't get to my knight by a move that I was going to make anyway. I was going to get this bishop out anyway so I could castle. So now I've cut off the king from the knight. That frustrated my opponent, so they moved a pawn up so they could come into the knight this way. But now I can get the knight out because those squares are protected by the bishop. And I thought, well, he can't get to me in the next move. So I went ahead and castled. Again, part of my plan. I can take advantage of these open files. Also, that's looking pretty handy for my bishop right there now that they've weakened the light squares in that corner. So, but they went after my knight, even, I guess, not realizing I can just get it out safely. So now I'm hitting this bishop, and my knight protects this square. Remember, I just said that would be a good place for this bishop. And, I mean, that would develop the piece. That would free this rook. So I was doing really well at this point. The engine knows they're in a bad place. It's recommending that as their best move, just to give away their bishop for a pawn. Well, since it's probably going to get lost soon anyway. But anyway, they resigned right there, I guess, realizing it was all over. So that worked out pretty well for me. Another Scandinavian win. Let's move on to game 4. All right, this is game 4 after 11 moves. White has just castled kingside. Now, before they castled, the king and the queen were lined up on the e-file, and I had just castled, so my plan was probably to move this here and start advancing. I wasn't quite sure, but then they castled. I gave it a second. I realized something I'm teaching myself to notice. When the king and queen are on the same file, the same diagonal, and I saw that I have a bishop that can access that diagonal. But if I did right now, it would just get captured. So, and I think I actually said out loud in the live stream as I was playing something about, man, I sure would like to get my bishop right there because, but it would, how do I protect it? I can't put a pawn here because, again, that would just be captured. So I thought about it. I thought, I could put my queen right here. They can't immediately attack that. And then I could put my bishop here. It was something to work for. Also, it gets the queen out into the battle. And the queen would be helping put pressure on this pawn, which, serves other plans as well. So I put my queen there. Not sure what my opponent should have done here. The engine says put this knight here, which would be a pretty nice fork. So, maybe that's what they should have done. But they didn't see this. In fact, it looks like they thought I was attacking the f2 pawn, which is weird because that's what I was doing in game 3, and this is an entirely different opponent. They moved the rook up, apparently to protect that pawn. That's the only reason I can see for moving that rook up. But anyway, because they didn't see that, I was able to put the bishop there. They did the best thing that they could, which was threaten my queen. If I take them, they take me with check. I have to capture, I guess, with the pawn, and then they get my bishop, and my pawn structure's all messed up. So I just moved my queen over, and they really had nothing there. They just got their queen out of the way and lost the rook for a bishop. And then, because I'm up in exchange, I thought it's probably best to just go ahead and trade at this point, which we did. And then I had the advantage for the rest of the game. This was actually the longest game of the 4 that I played yesterday. I believe it went to 40 moves, but there's no reason to show the rest of it. I maintained the advantage for the rest of the game at this point. As you can see, there's an open file right here for my rook. The opponent's rook still hasn't moved. This bishop still hasn't moved. The knight really doesn't have anywhere great to go. It was easy to clean that up. So I think it's not the first time I've ever won 4 Blitz games in a row, but it's the first time in a long time that I've ever won 4 Blitz games in a row. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.